What's up, YouTube? This is Biblical Truther. This is my third time trying to make this video, and it's going to be my testimony video just to show the saving grace of God. I've been in some situations in my life where I probably shouldn't be here to even do this video, more than just a few. But I'm going to start back in my childhood, and not my earliest memories, but some of them. Back at the age of 4, I remember my stepdad. He was borderline racist, I guess you could say. I went to an 85% black school right in the middle of the projects. Didn't go very well for me. Many fights, and he just loved that stuff, man. Him and my uncle used to get us in the middle of the hallway at our house where there wasn't doors to go in any rooms, and they would pick us up, my cousin and I, by our shoulders and just slam us into each other, you know, face to face, until we'd fight, kind of like you would do pit bulls. If you were to want to fight some pit bulls, it's kind of sad that they just thought that was just the funniest thing, get all tanked up on their beer and pit fight their children. It's a sad, sad thing. But that's just how my childhood started off, man. I remember my mom chasing him around the house with butcher knives. I remember going to creeks on holidays and just being all out brawls out in a sandbar. And I remember we had this car that didn't have a front seat. My mom and my stepdad had gotten in a fight, and we were leaving we were trying to leave the sandbar, and I had this pop gun that I had wanted for months and months, and it was just springtime, so I had a pop gun from Christmas for a little while. And I remember, her gathering us kids up, me and my 2 sisters, putting us in the car, and she's sitting on this 5-gallon bucket. And I remember him running up and just beating the windshield out of the car with my pop gun. So that was my childhood, my earliest childhood that I could remember. So moving along to when I was 8 years old, I lived in Slidell, Louisiana. I told this story once before on another video, but I'm going to tell it again. I went down to this pond, we called it the duck pond. There was a bunch of ducks. They was always, down there. I was always down there chasing ducks, swimming with them, doing typical kid stuff. But this particular day, excuse me, I passed this group by a little boat launch. It was a black church, or black church goers, I should say. But anyway, they were down there. They were baptizing people in this pond. So I go down past them to this little peninsula where I went and played with the ducks and whatnot. And sorry for the shaking. It's kind of bad, isn't it? But anyway, I remember playing. I remember on my way back out the trail, and then it just goes blank. I remember walking in this dark place, couldn't see my body, but I remember just walking, not knowing where I was at. And I felt this wave go across my head. Excuse me. And then I woke up in the back of a truck, surrounded by black people, praying over me. And I kind of freaked out. I jumped out of the truck, asking what they were doing, where's my bike. And one of the ladies brought me over to the side mirror of the truck, and showed me my face. And most of my chest and leg was just road rash. She said I got hit by a truck. And so the ambulance came, took me to the hospital, and I didn't have a broken bone in my body. All I had was the road rash. And on my way out, it was about 45 minutes of being at the ER. On my way back out, and there's a cop pulling my bike out of the trunk, and I kid you not, the frame was bent almost on a 45-degree angle right above the sprocket. So the cops asking around, who's the little boy that got hit? Where could I find him? And I was like, that's me. And he was like, ain't no way. Whatever kid was riding this bike is probably not walking right now. I said, well, that's my bike. It was a white BMX. I'll never forget it. So that was another time I almost got taken out. 2 years later, at the age of 10, I was at Christmas with another boyfriend of my mom's. She was a little promiscuous, to say the least. But we were out there, and it was a pretty decent day. We were shooting guns and stuff. I got a 20 gauge for my birthday, for Christmas that year. We were out there shooting and whatnot. So around dark, typical drunks started fighting and whatnot, and my mom's boyfriend's brother jumps in the car and strikes out. So we all go inside, and about 4 minutes later, he comes walking in the door, nose bloodied. He had ran up underneath my mom's boyfriend's trailer with his car, like all the way up to the windshield. So we all walked down the road, down the driveway to where his trailer was, to see just how bad it was. It was stuffed under there pretty good. So it was opposite the driveway from the house. So they were on the house side of the driveway walking back, and I was on the other side, kind of walking, looking across the side of the driveway. And this man who had been out there earlier that day steps out in front of me with a shotgun and blows a hole about the size of a basketball in the chest of my mom's boyfriend's brother's, just massive hole. So me, having lived the life I'd lived already, I seen this guy Peter coming from the other direction and just football tackled this guy with the gun. But he had already cocked his shotgun again, and they tackled him from the opposite direction I was standing in, and when they hit him, he just kind of fell right toward me, so I just dropped to the ground. And as soon as I dropped, he pulled the trigger. Boom! So I was this close from having my head blown off. 10 years old. And I watched Marty, another brother of my mom's boyfriend, walk off ejecting shells out the shotgun. And the big guy Peter, he was about 6'4". He had these fireman water boots on, and I don't know if you've ever seen fireman water boots, but they're pretty stout. And he was kicking this guy, and he was an older fella. Found out later he had just got out of Parchman for murder. But he was kicking this guy in the face, and I could hear the bones crunch every time he kicked him. And I just run up and pushed him, told him back up, police is coming, and kick, stomp this dude to death, you're going to jail next. And he just looked at me, shook his head, he said, you got some guts, kid. 2 years later, I was 12, my mom gets a phone call. She had a big elaborate waterbed headboard with all this stained mirror glass work and all on it, stored at Peter's house. My mom said that he was threatening to throw her stuff out, wanted me to ride with her. So I jump in the car and we go over there, and just as we're pulling in, he had this horseshoe driveway. Just as we're pulling in the driveway, he's standing at the door with the headboard and just chunks it out the door. He lived in a mobile home. So we pulled up in front. We seen the glass shatter. So we pulled up in the front. My mom tells me to stay in the car. She gets out, runs up on the steps, and I'm talking about he backhanded her so hard, she probably lifted 2 foot off the stairs. And I knew she had carried a gun at the time. I used to play with it. We lived in the projects at that time. I used to walk around the projects acting hard, you know. And I opened that glove box and I was expecting to grab that gun and just empty the magazine into this man. And there wasn't no gun. I think that was another saving grace of God, because I probably would have been charged as an adult, even though I just watched him smack my mother off the porch. But later on down the line, at 14, you know, I started getting into fighting again, and it's kind of my pastime. I had a friend of mine, he was pretty crazy, pretty wild. We had rolled up on a party, a acid party. You know, there was about 6 or 7 of us. We was going to fight about 40 guys. And we all jump out the car and start running across this field, and my homeboy, he pulls his gun out and starts shooting. And all I could see is steam coming out the radiator of this car that they had come across the field and lit the whole field up with. But man, I was this close. If any one of them people would have had a gun, especially tripping on acid, man, I could have lost my life that night too. Years later, I'm riding with a friend of mine. I was 17 now. I'm riding in the passenger seat. I have my homegirl Liz on my lap, and my boy in the back seat. His sister was driving. We're all drunk on some daiquiris. Been eating Valiums all day, so we was pretty lit, and we was running through a place called Wakai. It was going pretty fast, and all I can remember is her ducking out, and we went right off the road, and all I could see is this about 3-foot tall tree stump sticking up. So I bear hugged my little girl Liz and just laid back, and we hit this stump. And I didn't really see the accident. I just know we rolled a few times, and when we finally stopped flipping, everybody bailed out the driver's side, and I was kind of still sitting there. Liz is screaming, "It's gonna blow, it's gonna blow, get out, Mike." So my door wasn't open, so I'm trying to get out the driver's side, and my foot is stuck in the floorboard. Like, I finally ripped my foot loose out my shoe, climbed out the side, and then I realized it was just a radiator steaming. So I go back in the car and I try and grab my shoe, and it's literally the metal of the floorboard is wrapped around the sole of my shoe. That's how hard we hit that stump. And then I'm looking at the car afterwards. The whole top of the cab above the passenger side was smashed. Don't know how. She didn't get a scratch on her. I didn't get a scratch on me. No broken bones, not even bruises that time. That was the saving grace of God is all I can say. At 18 years old, I was in high school on my second senior year, because that was my grandmother's dying wish that I graduated, so I intended to do it. My girlfriend at the time, I got pregnant. Ended up having my son, my first child, at 19. So I immediately got out and got a job. I started selling drugs again after that, weed, because I made $7 an hour and couldn't really afford a family. But I was dead set on taking care of them, so I did what I had to do. You know, I look back now and could have made some different decisions, but I didn't. So during this time, I think I might have been 22. My son was about 3 years old. I started playing paintball a lot. Got involved in some other heavier drugs. But I met this guy playing paintball, and he used to come out there with a big stack of paintballs. And if anybody's played paintball before, you know it's about $40 a case for decent paintballs. And he'll come out there with about 10 boxes every weekend, like clockwork. And he had this nice tricked out Tippmann 98 custom So I get to talking to him and stuff. We play paintball over several months. And I kept asking, man, how you afford all these paintballs every weekend, dude? That's like my whole check in just paintballs. Well, he told me that he was a bodyguard for this guy that's Freemason in New Orleans. He was like a real high up Freemason. So I started selling him weed and whatnot. And I'm over at his house one night, and he's telling me, he's like, hey man, my boss said that he wants to meet you. Now I'm thinking, I don't know this man. What's that all about? He said, well, my boss is a 33rd degree Mason. He's like real into like spiritualism or whatever. And he claims that he's a psychic and that he had a dream because my friend, I found out, had AIDS, and he was on like his 3rd or 4th stage of AIDS, which is like right before you die. But he was his bodyguard, and he was at his house, and his boss man told him that he had a dream that his next bodyguard was gonna be someone that my boy knew. And he explained, you know, what this person looked like in his dream, and John said, well, the only person that, you know, fits that description is Mike, which is my name, by the way. So he's telling me all this, and I'm like, hell yeah, I'll meet him. Yes, indeed. You know, my boy didn't have a job. His kids went to private school. He didn't want for anything. Anything he asked for, he got. Basically a limitless credit card type situation. So I'm like, hell yeah. Might be able to get out of this this drug trade, you know what I'm saying? But my boy kept telling me, man, you don't want to get involved with these people. I didn't know nothing about Freemasonry back then. So you don't want to get involved in these people, Mike. Look, you know, he's got a plantation home uptown, but his neighbor is the leader of the Black Cult in New Orleans. I'm like, man, I don't give a damn about all that. You know, I'm just thinking money. You know, taking care of my kids and my old lady at the time. He was like, Mike, bro, I don't think you understand what I'm trying to tell you here, bro. Sometimes I go to work in the morning, you know, when he comes to town, because he only comes to town a couple times a month. And all he would do is just follow him around Bourbon Street. Make sure nobody messed with him. So I had to do that. He said, but look, sometimes I come in there and there's chickens in the trash can, dogs, you know, different types of animals, where they were up all night doing sacrifices, like satanic sacrifices of animals and whatnot. And I'm not worried about all that. So I went to meet him. This was about 2 months before Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. So I go down to New Orleans and meet this guy. And he don't look like your typical multi-millionaire, but I sat there while he got up, got moving around, came and sat down at the table. We talked for a few minutes, then he gets on the phone. And I'm listening to what this man's saying. He's basically setting the stock market in Chicago. What the prices are going to be for this, what the price is going to be for that, how much to raise this, how much to lower that. And I'm just like, this man must be up there, right? You know, to be able to have this kind of conversation with whoever to set the market for the day. So we talked a little more and all, and these 3 guys come in, big swole dudes, you know. And he said, now look, Mike, don't quit your day job right now. Give me about 2 weeks. But he introduced me to these guys. He said, each one of them's got a personal trainer. I'm gonna get all this set up for you. Give me about 2 weeks, and there's a place over in Metairie in Louisiana that does weapons training, and I'm gonna get you hooked up over there too, so you'll have a personal trainer, because I was a little chunky, you know. And then you can do the weapons training. That way, if John ever, you know, can't make it for whatever reason, then I'll just call you and you can accompany me to Bourbon. I said, well, that's fine. Well, I didn't know that we went down there after I'd met this guy. We were supposed to go move everything out of his plantation home. Now, mind you, this is 2 months before Katrina hit. But he stuns me when he says, after y'all finish with the first floor, once you get to the second floor, there's a big long table. Whatever you do, don't touch anything on this table, especially the book on the end. And I'm thinking, well, what's up with the book on the end? He was like, well, that's my job as a Freemason. It's the original Tibetan Book of the Dead. I'm the keeper of that book. I'm like, I've heard of it. You know, I've seen the movie The Mummy. But I'm like, okay. So we get over there and we start moving all this stuff out. And we get to the second floor, and sure enough, there's this table. But it ain't just a book on there. They were like gallon-sized pickle jars of like, I don't even know what kind of animals these were, but there were several of them. And they were in pickle jars, like baby embryos. So I started like looking a little crazy, you know what I'm saying? And then I seen the book, and it was a very old book. But I didn't touch it. I didn't touch anything on that table. It didn't dawn on me till years later, you know, actually just a few years ago, you know, with the weather manipulation and all that, you know, every rabbit hole I went down since the Lord's woke me up to the world and the way it is, that this guy probably knew that they were fixing to hit New Orleans with Katrina. Otherwise, why would you move all your belongings out of your plantation home? I'm talking a huge sprawl, 12 bedrooms, you know, multiple bathrooms. I mean, this was a very nice house. So what's your motivation to just move out of it? But anyway, 3 days after this happens, now I done told my dope man, I used to sell 30 pounds a week. He would bring it to me every Friday. And I done told him I needed to chill out, calm down, shit was getting hot and whatnot. But he insisted on bringing the next shipment. Well, I just got it that Friday. I met the Mason on Saturday. The following Tuesday, I was in jail. And being the rap sheet that I have, being I guess a violent person that I was, they put me on this tier with all the murderers and the rapists and the, you know, basically all the violent offenders. And they had this guy up on the second floor. He was a Mason, a 32nd degree or 31st. Anyway, he was over a 30th degree Mason, but he was the preacher on the tier. And I'm telling him when I found out he was a Mason about me meeting this Mason and whatnot. And he was like, dude, you met one of the top guys. He said, my dad was a 32nd. That's when he told me what degree he was, 30, 31st, whatever. But anyway, the next morning I'm coming out my cell, going to breakfast, and he comes down there and he was like, hey Mike, let me talk to you, man. Come up to my cell. So I go up there and he was like, look, I prayed about this all night last night, and the Lord told me that he's the one that put you here. Now I know now that God's in control of everything. But back then, I was like, what? God put me here. Why would God send anybody to jail? For one, because I ended up losing my family, my son. I lost him for many years after that. Why would God put anybody in jail? Well, it didn't dawn on me till 8-9 months later. You know, I'm praying and, you know, found religion, started reading the Bible, you know, like everybody else does in jail. But he never would answer that prayer to send me home, get me out of here. And I never stopped thinking about what that guy told me, that God put me there. So then I started thinking on a deeper level, like, why? What am I supposed to learn here? Well, back then, you know, from the time I was 14 to the time I went to prison, I was the type of dude that if I heard that you was going around bragging that you was bad, I'm coming to find you. I think I'm bad too. How about we find out who's the baddest? And I did that in my county, all over the place. That's why I got the reputation that still haunts me today. And I'm not saying I'm the baddest around or nothing like that, because I've met my match before. But that's just how I was, you know. You call me anything but a man, dude, bruh, you know, the common slangs or whatever for a male. Them was fighting words, and we finna fight. You mess with my people, my boys, my girls, it didn't matter who it was. If they were my people, then I'll just handle the drama for you. So that's who I was when I went to jail, and I was stayed that person for many months being locked up until I realized, started reading Proverbs and learning that pride is not a good thing whatsoever. Pride is like foolishness. And I started realizing just how foolish I was. Look where I was at. I actually had got out for about 6 days, about 2.5 months after Katrina. Got out on a probation bond. And, well, that was a different time I went to jail. That wasn't the first time. But anyway, that was over a violent charge. Guy jumped on my hood and I floored it. And anyway, it was just a bad deal. But God saved me, man. God saved me from getting involved with that Freemason, because he knew I was 5150 back then. If I'd have got in with this guy, there's no telling where I would have ended up, especially if he was that high of a Satanist. So God knows, once I'm 110% for anything, bro, I'm giving it 110% till the end. So had I got involved with that man, they could have, especially the animal I was then, they could have made me whatever they wanted, because money talks. But then the Lord knew exactly what to do. He put me in jail just so I can hear him talk. And that's what I did. I started listening. And then when he finally did grant my prayer to get out, I got out, and I was good for almost 6 months to a year, maybe even a little longer, maybe 2 years. I did pretty good. And then here come the drugs again. You know, the devil crept back in with my weaknesses. But anyway, I started my own business when I got out, and I prospered. I was making $6 grand, you know, 6 figures a year for the first couple years. And then, you know, when the housing market crashed in 08, it kind of went downhill. And then I went from making 6 figures to barely making 4, if I was lucky, 5 figures, you know, $10,000 a year with my business. So I basically had to shut it down and got back involved in the drug trade. And I did that for a long time after that. It went on for many, many years, about 8 or 9 years, till about 3 years ago, really. But when I turned 29, I had met my wife by chance. And I wasn't looking for anybody. She wasn't looking for anybody. And we just met at a friend of ours' house, looking to get high, no doubt. And I knew from the moment I met her that there was just something special about her. Matter of fact, we hung out for about a day and a half, and I ended up back in jail over the drugs. And I used my one phone call to call her, and I knew right after my 15 minutes was up, I just felt like I was supposed to tell her that I loved her. And that just wasn't like me, because I was wilding at that time. But he put me back in jail. And I stopped being around all them people once he let me out that time, because I knew my wife and I were meant to be. And we still dabbled with pain medicine. I had been in a pain clinic for a long time, and never really stopped the pain medicine till about 2 years in, we tried the Suboxone, and don't let them fool you with that crap. That's more addictive than the pain medicine. And I've been clean from that now for about 2 years. No, a year. Yeah, about a year. We just decided that we got to clean our bodies up. We are the temple of God, so all the polluting pharmacia medicine that we were taking is just hindering us from being able to hear God. Now I'm down to cigarettes. As you can see, I got my little vape. Trying that now. That's a tough one. I've quit many a times over the years, and this is probably by far the hardest.